Welcome to the Garden Talk podcast, where we interview growers from all over the world, both beginners and experts, seeking to learn more about what they know about gardening and how they do things in their garden. What's up, everybody? For those of you that don't know me, my name is Chris, aka Mr. Growit, and you're tuned into the Garden Talk podcast. This is episode number 161. In this episode, I interview Matt from Strange Show. He has been gardening for 8 years and is a fellow content creator. His YouTube channel has over 305,000 subscribers and covers a variety of things such as the history of the plant, latest research, gardening advice, and more. In this podcast episode, he talks about how he grows his plants in an ebb and flow hydroponic system. Everything from how the system works, nutrients, pH, ppm, environment, and more. If you want to see short clips of these podcast episodes, search Garden Talk Clips on YouTube. I also have a gardening channel where I show the plants that I grow. Both of those channels will be linked down in the YouTube description section below. One of my goals for this podcast is to bring free information about gardening to the general public. That being said, I'd like to thank the sponsors of today's episode who helped make that goal possible. Thanks to AC Infinity for sponsoring this episode. Check out their Ion Frame LED grow lights, which have the latest Samsung Evo LEDs. These grow lights include a schedule controller that features 10 brightness levels, dimming, and a sunrise-sunset feature. Click the link in the description section below so you can learn more about their Ion Frame LED grow lights, and the discount code MrGrowit15 works on both Amazon and their website, acinfinity.com. Stash Blend. Stash Blend consists of several ingredients in one, so you no longer have to buy individual bottles. It includes corn steep liquor, seaweed extract, humic acid, beneficial bacteria, silica, and mycorrhizal fungi. It can be used in addition to your synthetic base nutrients or be used in living soil systems. Simply mix it into water and water your plants with it. You can get it at stashblend.com, link in the description section below, and use the discount code THESTASH. Mars Hydro. Check out their new version of their drip irrigation kit. This system can connect to a Mars Hydro digital timer, sold separately, to enable fully automated watering. The reservoir was constructed with a durable foldable fabric, a PVC coating, and an outer nylon layer, making the system fully waterproof and leak-proof. More information is linked in the description section below, and right now their winter sale is going on where you can get up to 25% off their products. Also, try using discount code MrGrowit. You might be able to save a little more. And we are back, and I'm joined with Matt from Strange Show. How you doing today?
What's up, buddy? Thanks for having me on the show, homie.
Dude, thanks for coming on the show. Super excited to have you on. We actually met in MJ BizCon. You are a cool dude. That's all I can say about that, man. The vibes were right there. It's hard to really link up with people and be on the same level as far as things that you could talk about. And we have growing in common. We have the plant that we all know and love. We have that in common. And it was just good vibes all around.
For sure. And have someone that not only has those two things in common, but also making the YouTube videos. It's very rare that I talk to someone who also makes YouTube videos. So that was very cool to link up.
Yeah, content creation is its own thing. And yeah, it's like you're talking a different language and you're talking to somebody who doesn't have experience with it. Sure. So awesome, man. Well, happy to have you on the podcast today to talk about gardening because you grow. You have a very successful channel. I'm looking at it right now. It's over 300,000 subscribers. Congratulations on that, by the way. That's not easy to do. And I know it takes a long, long time.
It took a little while, but we got there.
You make content not only on growing, but on the consumption side of things as well. Very informative videos. I really like your history ones. You had one on like skunk number 1 and
Thank you
a couple
so much.
other strains, and really, really good information. Very entertaining. So if anybody hasn't checked out his channel, I'll definitely have it linked in the description section below.
Thank you, buddy.
So tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into gardening.
Oh, man, I've been into these plants that we like so much for a long time, since I was young, actually. I used to read about all kinds of cool growing techniques in gardening magazines, but I never really got into growing much back then just because the laws weren't very favorable in my area. But in like 2017 is when I moved to Colorado. And not long after living in Colorado, I got a job in a big commercial grow. I did that for a few years working in the harvest side of things. I did a few big harvest crews. We would go around to a lot of different grow facilities. So that job was really cool because I got to experience a lot of different grow facilities just from one job. And I eventually moved to the cultivation side of the commercial grow space. And eventually, when I moved out of my tiny apartment, I was like, hey, I'm living in Denver now. I'm going to start growing at home. And so that really all started in 2017.
Talking about your grow style, are you indoors, outdoors, soil, cocoa, hydro, organic, synthetic? What's your style?
Indoor. I've only done indoor so far. And I've only really done synthetic, like salt-based nutrients so far. Most of the grows I've done have been in cocoa or like a cocoa mix. But recently, I moved to like a flood and drain style growing with hydrogen pellets, the little expanded clay pellets, which has been pretty fun. I've been enjoying that.
How much of the commercial side of things, like the processes that they do commercially, how much of that do you take and implement in your home grow?
There's some of it that is that was useful for me to see, just like having a SOP and having a way you do things, and knowing like how important it is maybe to only try to implement one new change at a time, because if I'm implementing 3 new changes at a time and one of them works, it's going to be really hard for me to tell which one worked. Things like trellising, learning the importance of things that every grow facility I've ever been in does across the board. And you're like, there has to be a reason why we're all doing this. Like nice defoliations, trellising and supporting your plants, getting nice light penetration, and CO2. I don't know if I would have been so determined that like I have to run CO2 if I wouldn't have seen like every single commercial facility is all running CO2.
And we're going to get to CO2 here in a little bit. I know for home growing, it's kind of split between the people who do supplement CO2 and people who don't supplement CO2. So eager to hear your thoughts on that here in a little bit. So in the commercial facilities that you spoke about that you worked in, did they have an ebb and flow style, like the flood and drain style that you do now in your home grow?
Only at the very, very first grow facility I ever worked at, which I was on the cultivation side there, but it was such a large facility and I was such a new employee there that my main job was mostly just scrubbing out reservoirs all day. Nothing really glamorous. And I didn't really get a chance to learn a whole lot, but they were running basically the same exact setup I'm running at home, just on a much larger scale. But that's the only commercial facility I've ever been in that had that setup.
Got it. So you're able to get a little bit of knowledge from there and bring it to your home grow because of that.
At least it wasn't like completely foreign. I knew what the basic parts of the setup were. I knew how it functioned. I knew how to take one apart and put it back together. So that was a lot of weight off my shoulders already. Because when you're getting in, like at least for me, when I was getting into this, having all these timers and water pumps and everything is dependent on the electricity, it could all feel really overwhelming really fast. And so it was nice to start with at least a system I had had my hands on before.
Yeah, I can imagine. I know there's a lot of new growers out there that really get intimidated by all the pieces of equipment, when it comes to the hydroponic setup. Now, we do have quite a few beginners that tune into this podcast. We have beginners, intermediate, and also advanced folks. Looping in the beginners, there are some folks that probably don't know what an ebb and flow system is. Could you explain what it is and how it works?
Yeah, for sure. So it's basically you have all of your nutrients and your water in one main reservoir. You just have a couple of pumps and timers, and your timer is set up to where your water from your reservoir pumps to the buckets where your plants are for a certain amount of time, lets them get some nutrient uptake, and then after whatever time you determine, it pumps the water out of the plant bucket back into the main reservoir. You can just set that up to cycle throughout the day so you can get different periods of flooding and draining. So you have different periods where you have nutrient uptake, and you have periods where you also have a lot of availability for the roots to get oxygen. So you don't have to worry about root rot and stuff like that.
Okay, and then would that be on a schedule? Can you talk about kind of the watering, flooding schedule for the ebb and flow setup?
Yeah, the system I have right now is just on like the old school analog timer where you push the little pins out. So every one of those pins is 15 minutes. And when I have a little seedling that's just like in the little peat moss cube, I'll really only try to touch that cube enough times throughout the day so it doesn't dry out. So maybe one 15-minute flood every 2 or 3 hours, depending on how it seems to be reacting. And then as the plant is growing and getting bigger, then I'm bumping it up a little. Maybe I'll go one 15-minute flood every hour. And then by the time I'm all the way into flower and the plants are bigger, depending on how big the plants are, I might be flooding multiple times per hour, all the way throughout the day, 24 hours a day.
Got it. And I assume that you've got nutrients in there. Are you using some synthetic line of nutrients? And what's the EC or ppm that you aim for the different stages of growth?
Yeah, I'm running all salt-based nutrients right now. Recently, I've been running Athena. I've been liking it a lot. It's my first run with Athena, and I've also recently been running Autoflowers, which I'm not used to. So usually I might be, and a lot of times I'm just testing this in like a ppm reading. So a lot of times in veg, I might be getting up to 700 or 800 ppms in the peak of veg, and then maybe even over 1,000 ppms in the peak of flower. But I found that these Autoflowers I've been running, it's just a few, but they seem to like a lot or need a lot less nutrients. So I've been running about half of that strength with the Autoflowers. I've pretty much been taking the feeding chart that Athena recommends and just cutting it straight in half. And it's been working really well.
Yeah, that's a common question that people ask is about Autoflowers and their feeding. It's often hear that it requires less nutrition. And there's some people that say, no, it requires the same amount. So I think that's one of like the debated topics amongst the community is whether or not auto should be treating differently when it comes to feedings. So it's interesting to hear your experience that, yeah, you've had to cut the dose in half there.
I heard the same thing. And so I went with the full strength, and you could see the normal signs. It just wasn't happy. You could see the leaf tip burn starting. And then I just backed off. I was like, I let it go for maybe a whole week before I was like, I got to change this reservoir. It's just too much. Because it felt like too much. Because I think what it was recommending, even early in veg, was 1,100 ppm. And it said that this formulation is made to run at a higher EC. And I was like, all right, let's try it. Never tried these nutrients before. I'll go with what they recommend. And I think it was just this particular cultivar because the whole plant, finished, is only this big. And so it makes sense that it doesn't need that much salt.
True. Yeah, I know some Autoflowers can grow massive and then some just stay squat. Really comes down to genetics. Obviously, it comes down to other things, the lighting, environment, nutrition, all that stuff. But yeah, some could be real small. So it makes sense for those smaller plants to need lesser nutrition, right?
Yeah, it does to me.
Now, mixing up those nutrients in water, what is your water source? Are you just using tap water or are you filtering the water in some way like reverse osmosis, or what's your water source?
I have a 75 gallon per day RO filter in the house. It's just hooked up underneath my kitchen sink and it's off 90% of the time. But I know like every time I'm about to have to fill my reservoir tomorrow, I'm going to change it. I'll go ahead and turn on the filter tonight. Fill me up a few 5-gallon buckets and get ready. So I always have the RO water at the house. I don't have to worry about going and trying to get distilled water or worrying about what's in my water supply. Because I know just a few years ago here in Denver, the city of Denver sent out Brita water filters to everyone. And they're like, hey, we highly suggest that before you drink the water from your sink, that you put it through this Brita filter. So since a lot of plants are so good at holding on to things like heavy metals and stuff that they have access through the roots, I just figured that's nothing I want to risk.
Yeah, better safe than sorry, man. I'm in a similar boat to you. I live in Las Vegas, and out the tap, it's 485 ppm.
Wow.
A lot of people who tune into my content have heard me say that a ton of times, but I figured I'd mention it here. And so, yeah, I also use reverse osmosis. And I like how the newer systems are now kind of a 1-for-1. The past system I had was a 1-for-3. For every 1 gallon you get of reverse osmosis water, you're wasting 3 gallons.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the system that I bought is a 1-for-1, which is so much better.
And it's so much faster.
Yes, bigger tubing. You have the same one, or?
No, I don't. I'm still on the old one. I don't know what the ratio is, but if you hold up the waste line and the fill line, you see the waste line pouring and the fill line dripping. And I hate doing that. I'm always trying to figure out what can we use this water for? What can we use this wastewater for?
And a lot of people, what they do is they put it in their backyard. They water their plants out back with
we've
it.
Done that too. We've used it for the house plants.
Some people use it and they have their drain line hooked up to a 5-gallon bucket and they flush their toilets with it.
So, that's smart. That's smart. Save you a couple of toilet flushes.
There you go. Right? So yeah, you can use that water. And then a lot of water sources, they go right back into the local water municipal system and that gets cleaned. So is it really being fully wasted? Well, yeah, it's going back into the system. But
yeah.
But there's energy that takes to kind of reclean and stuff like that. So yeah, that's a bigger debate here.
Yeah.
Okay, and then after you mix in the nutrients, does it require a pH adjustment at all?
Yes. Well, the way that Athena works is you put in the pH adjustment first. So it's sort of it's actually the exact opposite of what you would expect from a lot of other lines where you would mix all of your stuff and then adjust your pH at the end. You do it that way the first time to judge how many milliliters per gallon I needed. Then the next time you can do that first. But with hydro especially, I'm always super on top, or I try to be super on top of the pH. Because not only have I experienced with hydro something I never dealt with before, which is a pH drift, because I never really had a reservoir of nutrients sitting around for, 2 weeks. I would mix up the nutrients and I would use them that day. So you'll get a little drift. Your pH will slightly rise over time. And I think that's probably because I have an air stone in my reservoir. But also with hydro, there's no buffer. Like if you had soil, it probably would be a much better buffer. Cocoa would even be a good buffer. If you have some beneficial bacteria, that's going to help be a mediator between this crazy pH water and your bare roots. But in the hydro system, it's just bare roots. The nutrient mix goes right to them. And if you have a nutrient mix and the pH is way, way off, that could really, really affect your plants with just like 1 or 2 feedings. So I try to go in every single morning, check the pH every morning, adjust if needed, and again in the afternoon. So I'm trying to check and adjust my pH as needed twice a day.
Got it. And what do you typically aim for a pH?
I'm going for 5.8 to 6.2. And when I first will reset the reservoir, like the first night, I'm always making sure that I'm shooting for that low end. So I'll shoot for the 5.8 because I know if in the 10 or 12 hours I'm gone before I check it again, if it does rise a little bit, hopefully I won't get out of my sweet spot of that 5.8 to 6.2.
Okay, that's typically what I'm aiming for in deep water culture. So similar with hydro setup, right? And I use Blue Planet nutrients. And the cool thing about that set of nutrient lineup is once I mix in the nutrients, it always mixes up to 5.8 pH. So it's like awesome. Just perfect, exactly where I want it. And so when I change the reservoir, I add that in there and it's at the perfect set pH. Now, I do encounter a little bit of pH drift, but I've noticed for the most part, it drifts downwards. I know some people say the opposite. They say it drifts upwards for them. But yeah, I mean, I go 5.8 pH. The next day I'll check it. It'll be at 5.5. It's even gone down to like 5.1 and I have to pH up it.
See, I've never heard of that either. Because even before this, I've only done hydro a few times. And before this, I was running the General Hydroponics Flora series. I think I was running it was the 3-part Flora series plus a few additives, maybe a 6-part or something like that. And I was having the same issue with the drift, but it was still going up. And since I was really new to this, I just started asking around. And what I seem to hear from everyone is that pH drift is common and it usually always drifts up. And I got a million different reasons why that could happen, but I never really heard about it going down.
Yeah, me neither until I actually experienced it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've been able to adjust it and get things back on track there. So, but yeah, 5.8, 6.2, same exact range I aim for.
Nice.
I want to take a step back and get more into your grow space. What size grow space are you in, and how many plants do you typically run in that space?
What I've been liking the most until I recently had to downsize was a 5x5 tent. I was running two 5x5 tents. I had like a big basement that they could both go in, but I liked having the grow spaces separated because I'd rather have two harvests at two separate times rather than harvesting a 10x10 plant and having to deal with that whole drying and trim jail of a 10x10. So I'll run the 5x5 and I like to space out just 4 plants in there. So I'll be able to run those 4 plants a little bit bigger, but with some trellising, I'll still be able to fill out the canopy all the way from corner to corner really nice. And I like that mix because it's not too crowded and it's not too many plants for me to work on. But with these new autoflowers I'm running, I'm looking at a 5x5 and thinking that if I had these ones that are staying this small and this wide, a foot tall and a foot wide, that there's no telling how many I could run in a 5x5, especially if I'm doing like 3-gallon pots, maybe.
Is that what you're doing right now, 3-gallon, or?
I have been doing 5-gallon pots, but that's because I'm usually running photo period plants that I let veg for a few months, and I usually run them pretty big. And so I want that big root mass for the bigger plant. But on this plant I'm running now that's an autoflower, I don't think the plant is barely as wide as the pot is. And the rule of thumb I've always heard is as above, so below. So roughly the size and shape of your plant above the ground will be roughly what your root mass size will be. So if I'm going off that, I'm looking at this pot and thinking it might not even be needed to be that big.
Yeah, I know a ton of people will get away with just 1-gallon containers in ebb and flow system, for example. Right. So they can go a lot smaller. Yeah. And remind me, I know you said in the very beginning, but what's in the containers? Is it just Hydroton, or did you say cocoa?
I have a, so inside of the buckets themselves, they're square buckets, and I have square fabric pots. The fabric pot is filled with Hydroton clay pellets. And then right in the middle of that is like a little net basket. And that's what I'll have where I'm starting my seedling. And in the middle of the net basket will be like a little peat moss based growing cube, like a little rapid rooter cube.
Okay, got it. And then since you're in a flood drain system, a tray in that 5x5, are you running is it a 4-foot by 4-foot tray or what?
Now, the way this setup works is it's all contained in buckets. So
okay.
There's the reservoir, and then what you have called the brain bucket, and it has a few floats and sensors in it, and it just has lines at the very bottom of the bucket. So the brain bucket, which is what it's called, the main bucket that feeds all your plant buckets, it will fill up to whatever level you set it with the float. And then through the outlets in the very bottom of that bucket, it just leaks out through the force of gravity. And whatever level this brain bucket is, everything just sort of settles out at that same level. And then when it's time to drain back to the reservoir, there's one pump in the brain bucket that sort of sucks all the water back from all of the plant buckets and pumps it back to the reservoir.
Got it. Okay, so it's a little bit different than the traditional style ebb and flow system where you have a flood drain tray.
Yeah, usually you might have like a table like you're describing, and you could just flood the whole table, let that sit there for a while, and then just let gravity drain the whole table out.
Exactly.
But this way you have a little more flexibility with your layout. So I could go maybe different shapes or wider than a tray might allow me to go without having to buy a new tray, Because with this, I have a 30-gallon reservoir that I only really fill up to about 25 gallons full. But with this one brain bucket, if I had like a 60-gallon reservoir, I could run, 24 plant buckets from that one brain bucket.
That's awesome. Seems like you get some good flexibility doing it that way.
Yeah, it seems really cool. I've never really expanded it to more than 4 plants because I've never really run this system in anything bigger than a 5x5. But if I ever want to, all I have to do is grab a few more buckets and a few more feet of rubber hose.
Nice. Well, is this been on your channel yet? Do you have videos of this setup, or maybe on your Instagram, or no?
No, we've been running through it a little bit on our live streams recently, but the last grow series I did, we were still in cocoa. That was the beginner's grow guide series. Then I ran a 5x5 with the hydrogen and the hydro setup, like we've been talking about, in my kitchen. And I did end up filming the whole thing, even though it was sort of just to film it because it was funny. I'm growing a 5x5 tent in my active kitchen that I also cook dinner and eat in every day. But I never got around to editing it together. I had a bad habit of just filming the footage and letting it sit in a folder, thinking, I'll get to that one day. And now it's just gigabytes and gigabytes of plant stuff. And I need to find all these notes and put it all together. But I've never put it out on the channel yet. But I'm gearing up right now, setting up a new grow space that I want to try a few different kinds of. I want to try like a drip feed from the top too. Instead of a flood and drain, I want to try, I don't know, I want to try some new stuff. So I'm setting up some new grow spaces right now. So 2025 will hopefully have a lot of hydroponics on the channel.
That's awesome. Yeah, I can totally relate when you say that you film all the footage and then you never get around to editing it. Oh my gosh, yeah. I have filmed dozens of videos that never actually made it to YouTube, unfortunately, because I don't think a lot of viewers really understand how long it takes to edit,
especially with a grow video, because just the time involved, you're looking at least 4 months of footage.
Yep.
Even if you only go take a few clips every day, that's still so many shots.
Yeah, it's it really is. So getting into lighting next, what type of lights do you use, and is there a certain amount of PAR that you aim for your plants?
I'm always running LED lights. I really don't have like a brand loyalty to any specific LED lights. I know when I was first getting into the legal industry, I saw a lot of places, and I still do see a lot of places, running these big double-ended 1200 watt high pressure sodium bulbs, and they get so incredibly hot and they use so much energy. It just doesn't make sense to me why all of these facilities don't switch over to LEDs, especially with the LED technology we have now. Like, people are growing amazing plants with LEDs. So I really like the LED. I really like any light that I can take the ballast off of the light and mount it outside of the tent. I really love those because I like to shoot for lower temps at the end of flower, especially if I have something that has those really pretty anthocyanins, and I'm really trying to bring that color change out. And as far as for like PAR, I really like anything. I'm really looking for that sweet spot of something that can reach like 1,000 micromoles per meter squared per second, I think is the measurement.
Yep, ppfd.
So I'm looking for that center of that heat map of the light. And that's where my eye always goes to first. Is it hitting 1,000 or is it not? Because I know, especially like we were saying, sometimes if you're running CO2, I feel like I can push the plant harder with more lumens. I can push it a little harder with more heat. I can push it a little harder with nutrients, because it's just that CO2 is helping it photosynthesize more efficiently. And I feel like if I want that really bright light, I would always rather have more light than I need, because you can always turn it down. But if I get into the end of flower and I feel like I don't have enough, well, now I'm stuck with the light that I've got.
Yeah, I completely agree. Being able to dim it down, it also increases the lifespan of the fixture, running it at a lower percentage there.
Yeah, for sure. When you're not having to run it at 100% all day, every day.
Yep. So do you know what brand and model light you have in your 5x5, or?
The 5x5 was a Spider Farmer SE7000, which is a really nice light. I really like it a lot. It's big and it's bright, but the ballast comes off, so that was helpful, and it never gave me any problems at all. I actually just gifted that light to a homie on the Discord, so I hope they're growing some good plants with it now.
No, that's nice of you. Yeah, Spider Farmer is a very popular brand. They've been around for so long now, 10 plus years. I know a lot of people run their lights. I had a handful of their lights in the past, and I used to do par tests back in the day, I think 2019, 2020. And I had my hands on a bunch of their fixtures, and I used a couple of their fixtures. The SP2000 I used, SP4000.
See, when they were on the SP, I don't even think I was familiar with their products when they were on the SP line. I don't even know if I've heard of those.
Yeah, I think I got it right.
But they change up the line, like the acronyms for the line every few years. So I'm always getting confused. But I do see, like, even in the Discord community, I see a lot of people in my Discord running Spider Farmer lights and all kinds of Spider Farmer gear.
I'm sorry, I meant SF2000, SF4000, not SP.
Oh, okay.
I misspoke. Sorry, it's been a long time since I ran those lights.
Yeah, but that's how they do. They will throw in an SP. They'll throw in a million SFs, then they'll throw in an SP, and you'll be like, hold up, what's the SP? What is SP?
Right. Yeah, those are the board style that they have. I think they still sell it today. And then everybody's going after the bar style, which is the SE series that you had. And I think that has a lot better light spread, provides that light spread, more even light spread across the coverage area. Having that hot spot in the middle and then having it drop off significantly towards the outer edges. Yeah. That's kind of a thing of the past now, luckily.
It's not ideal at all. And I also like the open design of having these open bars rather than a big hunk of like some kind of plate. Because now all of that heat that comes off your diodes, it can just go straight up between your bars instead of having to make its way, linger around right at the top of your canopy until it can eventually get blown by a fan and make its way around that big board to get up to your exhaust fan and make it out.
True. I know some of the heat does go through the actual fixture. It's kind of like a heat sink, so it does actually go through it and upwards. And
oh, yeah, that's a good point, too. A lot of them have like heat fins all over the top.
Yeah. Man, there was some crazy designs back in the day for those things.
Yeah.
So heat, is that an issue where you are at? Kind of let's get into environment a little bit. Temperature, what do you typically aim for?
I'm usually going for like a low around 75, maybe a high around like, sometimes I'll let some plants go over like, high 80s. I'm not scared when I have a lot of CO2 in the tent. I'm not scared to see 90 degrees, 89 degrees, 90 degrees. If the plant looks healthy, I have my little infrared thermometer so I can put the laser on a leaf and see what my leaf surface temp is. And as long as the leaf surface temp isn't crazy high, I don't really mind running hot. And then I tried to not, and that is with supplemented CO2. And then for my nighttime temps, I try not to swing. I really never want to swing more than 15 degrees from day to night. And I really like to keep it more to like 10 degrees. And if I want to go colder at night, I like to start dropping down in the daytime too. I'm really always thinking about like, what is the plant evolved to like over millennia of growing outdoors. And in the end of the season, you're going to get colder temps in the day and the night. So a lot of times I'll try to mimic that same thing indoors.
And that can have so many benefits. I know Dr. Bruce Bugby had mentioned, it was years ago now, when he had revealed that a lot of people are dropping the temps late in flower in order to conserve the terpenes that are there. As I actually recently watched one of your videos, you were talking about how the terpenes can volatilize, evaporate. You lose them in the air, right? The higher the temp. I think it was a curing video that you were talking about that in particular, but that's true when you're growing the plant as well. And a lot of people will open up their grow tent or open up their room and they're like, it smells beautiful in here. But they're running too high of a temp, so they're losing all those terpenes off the plant. It's going into the air. Yeah,
that all would have been in your curing jar if your temp would have been lower. And I think some of these can start to volatilize and evaporate at as low as like 70 degrees, like just regular standard, what you would consider a cool, comfortable room. So if you're thinking about these things trying to survive right under this light and they're 6 inches away and they're 96 degrees with no airflow, they don't have a chance. They're doing everything they can just to survive.
Cooking off those trichomes at those high temps.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like Dr. Bugby had mentioned, is people drop it down to about 75 degrees Fahrenheit, 78 degrees Fahrenheit. Some people go lower than that. And just to translate to the folks who use in Celsius, 75 degrees Fahrenheit is 23 degrees Celsius. And then you had mentioned you go sometimes up to 85 degrees, which is 29 degrees Celsius. So just wanted to convert that over for the folks that are working in Celsius instead of Fahrenheit.
Thanks for that. I would have had no idea what the conversion is.
Okay, so that's daytime and nighttime temps, and you mentioned you're running CO2. How about relative humidity? What do you typically aim for there?
In the beginning of veg, I'm trying, like when I have a really small seedling, I'm trying to do whatever I can. I might even put a little dome over it. I'm trying to get maybe 65% or more. And as I'm going through veg, that's going to eventually taper off and level out to maybe around 55, 60% relative humidity. I have a big chart on the wall that shows you where your ideal VPD range is at whatever specific temp you are for whatever desired kilopascal range. And I'm always trying to reference that chart nowadays and get the VPD dialed in. And it always seems to feel, if I was going off my gut, I think I would always run the tent a little drier than what this VPD chart tells me. But I've just been going with it. And the plants like it. They like it a little hot and sticky.
Yeah, I typically aim for that VPD range as well. And to my surprise, it's usually when I'm looking at the temperature I'm running and the humidity I naturally used to run before I even knew about VPD. It fell within that VPD range, the ideal range. On those charts, there's different colors, right? The dark green is the optimal range, and then there's a light green, which are really the tolerance range or acceptable range to be in, so it's a little bit wider. And then you have the yellow range, or even red. Some of them have red ranges.
And that's like gives it, I'm sorry to cut you off, but that relates directly to how efficient this plant is going to be at using nutrients, because if it's not able to transpire properly at the rate it needs to, well, then it's not going to draw water in the rate it needs to, or at the rate that it could.
100%. Now, I've seen a lot of new folks that are beginners and they get caught up with it. They struggle with running those higher humidities because oftentimes it runs a little bit higher of a humidity. It calls on the VPD chart for a little bit higher of humidity than what some people are traditionally used to. Hear of a lot of people that say, oh, I run around 40% relative humidity in flowering, or some people run 50% in veg. Well, depending on the temperature, that could potentially be a little bit outside of that optimal range. Now, it's still within the tolerance range, so the plant is still going to grow, but some people do aim to be in that dark green range at all times.
And these plants, a lot of these medicinal plants, they'll put up with a lot, and they'll still grow, and they'll take you all the way to harvest. And if you never knew to try something else, you might not even see a sign that they could do much better until you tried that.
I agree. I grow in the desert here, and there's been times where I really didn't monitor VPD or humidity at all. This was before YouTube, back in 2011, 2012, before I started watching YouTube, I should say. I was running 30% humidity, 35% humidity, the whole grow. And the plants still grow, and I still got to harvest.
Yeah. And you'll never know that, oh man, maybe my plants would have been a lot cooler if I would have paid attention to that, because you got done and you're like, wow, these look amazing.
Yeah, exactly. And it could have been so much better.
Yeah. Humidity is one thing that is a little tricky for me here in Denver, just like it is for you in Vegas, I assume, because it's just dry here. It's just super dry here. So to get this high humidity, I'm always running a humidifier. And the hydroponics does help a lot, because say I'm in the 5x5, I'm running a little high temp, and I have 5-gallon buckets in the tent that fill up, a majority of the way full of water. Or I mean 4 of them. So for a lot of the portion of the day, there's 20 gallons of water just like open to the air in the tent. So that helps a lot, which was great until this last 5x5 run. It came up like it was going to be, just so happens, the last few weeks of flower, I was going to be out of town. And I didn't really have anyone who knew what they were doing to watch the plants that could really, play it by ear and make adjustments. I just had to say, when the water gets low, add some more water, please. Make sure the house doesn't catch on fire. I'll be back as soon as I can. But that humidity from those buckets, just from that, even with my exhaust fan set on 10, they said this exhaust fan didn't go off the whole time you were out of town. But it just couldn't get it down enough, which really surprised me in Colorado. And I ended up getting bud rot. And like the majority of my bigger, chunkier bud sites, I had bud rot. And it was really surprising, but it was a big learning curve that I didn't really think about. I'm introducing 20 gallons of water into this grow tent right under a hot lamp. That's a lot of water. That's a lot of humidity that I'm going to have to deal with. And if I'm just exhausting it out into my lung room and sucking it right back up into the tent, that humidity never had a chance to go anywhere. So I end up having to use I think I'm going to use a 2-in-1 dehumidifier / AC unit if I have to fight that on my next round.
It's really shocking how much of an impact it has on the humidity. I had the same thing. My DWC system, I don't even need to run a humidifier in this grow tent because the plant's just transpiring and it's raising up that humidity so quickly. And then the exhaust kicks on at a certain, when it reaches a certain point, and it exhausts the air out of there, that humid air in there, and it brings in that dry air that I have naturally here in my house.
Yeah.
Now, also, it's true for auto watering systems. So just going from hand watering soil, for example, going to an auto watering system, whether it be a auto pot system or I'm running blue mats, it's the same thing. You have that constant moisture level in there. The plant's able to take up water and transpire, and it raises the whole humidity. A lot of people run into the problem where lights off. They realize that lights off, all of a sudden the plant is transpiring like crazy. The humidity just spikes up. And that's where a lot of people, they'll end their light cycle and they'll open up their tent and they'll start to see powdery mildew because of their unbeknownst to this humidity spike during lights off. So yeah, it's very surprising. I was very shocked when I first encountered that. It's helpful for me because I don't have to fill my humidifier as much.
You know what I mean? Yeah, it's really nice. It was a shock though, because I thought I thought this is going to be I thought about the humidity, but I didn't, I really underestimated it. I thought this is going to be nice, I'm filling my humidifier less. And my brother called me. I'm in Texas at the time. And my brother called me and he's like, hey man, this humidity is above what you wrote down where it should be. And the fan just won't go off. I was like, well, you can open the door during lights on, but at night, I don't know what you can do without me there. I would have to workshop this in front of the tent. And so I guess just to do what you can and I'll be home soon.
Man, that's rough. Yeah, and that's one of the importance and lessons learned, I guess, of if you can exhaust outside of the room entirely. Don't just dump it into your lung room. Now, some people can get away with it, but traditionally, a lot of people have to resort to either drilling a hole in their wall to get it out to a whole different room or exhausting it out a window, for example. But yeah, getting that air.
That's what I'm trying to set up for the new room. It's a must for me. I'm going to have to exhaust every tent out of the house. And I'm probably going to pull in, or at least have the option to whenever I want, flip on a fan and pull in air from outside of the house also. So I can get the old air out, the new air in, but it's a little different when you're running CO2 because I also don't just, if I can avoid it, I don't want to just dump all my CO2 straight out of the window.
Yes, and that's, I think, where a lot of people steer themselves the wrong way is they'll supplement CO2, but then they'll have their inline fan kick on and exhaust it all out of the grow space.
Yeah.
So let's get into CO2 a little bit deeper here. How do you supplement CO2? Using the tanks or using one of the other methods?
Before, I've never tried the little cans, but I have tried the, what are they called? I can't remember the name, but the little mycelium bags. I've had those. I've ran them more than they recommend you to run them, like more in my space than they say you need. And it seemed like, for me personally, in my limited experience, I could never really get the ppm of CO2 I was looking for. I think the highest I ever got with 3 of those bags in a 5x5 tent was like 860 ppm. So now I just run a 20-pound tank. I have a 20-pound tank right outside of my tent. I have an automatic controller that goes in the tent. There's a little fan in that controller that's always pulling air through the box and getting a CO2 reading on it. And I can set my high and low. And so then if I set my low to say 800 and my high to 1400, as soon as the CO2 dips below 800, the electronic valve will open and that tank will start leaking out CO2. It's just piped in through a little small air hose that's run right to the very top of my tent because the CO2 is really heavy. So I run it up top. The goal is to have it fall down, and as it's falling through the canopy, all these fans towards the bottom of the tent are just going to keep it moving all around the leaf surfaces so they can just use it all the time. Because your leaf can really only use the CO2 that is like right there touching the leaf surface on the top and the bottom. So I always want to be moving it around. But after you get it set up, after I have this set up, it was a little expensive to set up. The controller is a little expensive. The valve isn't very expensive, but the electronic controller is. And that first CO2 tank, I think, was close to $200. But the way it works is it's just an exchange program. So now every time I want to go get more CO2, I just take my empty tank to the grow shop, drop it off, and pick up a new one. They don't like refill it or anything. They have full ones there waiting on you. And that price to refill that is very, very small. Like, I'm paying like under, I think it's like $15. I can't remember exactly. It's so small that I don't even know the exact price. Because usually when I add it to whatever else I'm getting from the grow store, like I'm not sure how much it costs. You know, it's under $20 is all I know. But for the potential that you can get in your growth, and not just your growth, because it's not always about biomass. It's not always about plant size. To me, I like this CO2 really because it makes my plant, it just seems to make the plant more hardy in every way I can imagine. It seems to make it more resilient to drought stress, more resilient to heat stress, more resilient to pest and pathogens. And if I can get faster plant growth, that's always great. Even if I'm not going for a bigger plant, I always like to get to harvest, quicker. If I can save a little time, that's always great. It gives me time to start a new round.
It's super beneficial. I know there's a study out of Utah State University where they ran 1400 ppm in the flowering stage and they got a 30% increase in yield.
I saw that. I saw that. I think it was Debaco University covered that on his YouTube channel. And when you see those pictures of those plants, you're like, well, that's clear. That's clear as day. That's the clearest thing I've ever seen. Like, there's no way it's when you realize it. And for me, it was really like what really made me look into it is when I realized how many of these big commercial facilities might cut corners to save money here and there and there and there. And they're cutting corners to save money wherever they can, but never, ever, ever on the CO2. The CO2 is running all day, every day, really high, 1400, 1500 ppms. And it's because they've seen it. It's because they've had a room that had a few hundred plants in it. And then they had a room right beside it with a few hundred plants in it. And they only had enough CO2 one round to run it in one room. And they saw the difference in these two rooms. And they were like, okay, that was huge. That was 30% more money came out of the same size room. We can never make that mistake again.
Yeah, so super beneficial. A lot of good can come out of it. Although it is a upfront cost. You mentioned $200 for the tank to begin, plus hundreds of dollars for the controller, valve, all of that stuff. But pays for itself pretty quickly there.
Yeah, I think so.
Are you running it daytime only? A lot of people will just do CO2 in the daytime, and they'll say ignore it during nighttime.
Yeah. The controller I have is actually set up to run exactly that way. So it's monitoring two things at the same time. The first one is the fan that pulls the air through and reads the actual ppms of the CO2. The second thing is just a little light monitor right on the front of the controller box. So, and you put that inside of your tent. And so anytime there isn't a very bright light source, like if your grow light isn't turned on, then that thing just defaults to stay off all night long. So all during the night or all during lights off, it's not putting out any CO2 at all. And then as soon as the lights come on in the morning, it just starts all over again.
Pretty straightforward there. One thing to mention about those tanks, talking to what I call a buddy of mine, Chris from Happy Hydro. He was on the podcast actually twice now. And one of the things he had mentioned is when he was running CO2, actually I think the story had to do with his buddy running a CO2 and getting a tank from the grow store. Well, he ended up getting a pest infestation from that tank. Now, I don't know if this is just a one-off instance, but I think he got spider mites. I don't know how they were attached to the tank, but he brought that in without cleaning the tank or whatever. And then his garden got infested. So I don't know what the odds are, what the chances of that happening, but figured I'd mention that here in case anybody else is getting those tanks. You might want to consider cleaning it off to prevent pests from coming in.
And I've never actually done that, but I have had the thought before because I've been in the grow store hearing someone talk about having pests at home. And I looked over at them like, oh man, we're in the same building right now. The pest might have came from because like if you're in the garden and they're on your clothes and then you come to the grow store with all these, ornamental plants and all this soil to live in, it's like a pest dream. And they can just live in there and hitchhike home on your sleeve or on your CO2 tank. That's scary.
Happens more than we know it, I'm sure. So getting into pests a little bit more, have you ever come across any major pest infestations?
Luckily, I've never come across any major pest infestations at home in my personal grow. I've had pretty decent outbreaks of fungus gnats a couple of times, but those were pretty easily gotten under control with just some yellow sticky traps and some diatomaceous earth on the top of my soil. But working in the legal, commercial space, I've seen things that look like the movie Arachnophobia with spider mites. I've seen thrips so thick that it makes you want to crawl out of your skin. I've seen so many worst case scenarios. I've seen rooms with PM and stuff that make it look like it's snowing when you shake the plants. And so I've always been, since day one, when I started my first garden at home, I've always been super duper scared of that cross contamination from the commercial facility to my little home garden. Because if I look at the bugs and the pests, especially these spider mites in the commercial space, as like super mites, because you got to think they come from a colony of 40 million, maybe 40 billion. We have multiple rooms. Each room has maybe 100, a few hundred, maybe 1,000 plants. And it's all like a big budget commercial grow. They're running around spraying their IPM and trying their best to kill them. So the ones that survived all of that are the strongest of the strong, and they've lived in all these environments. They were born and bred inside. They come from indoor gardens. So I feel like if I get these little suckers in my house, that I'll never get rid of them, because the infestations I see at work, usually when I see these infestations, like the ones I'm talking about, you just open the door and you immediately see webbing across a whole grow room. There's nothing you can do for that. And I've spent days pre-harvest just trying to do physical removal. It's far too late into the growth cycle to use a chemical, but I'll be going through with a wet paper towel or a rag or something, trying to wipe the nugs off before we go to harvest. And it's just, there's nothing you can do when it gets that far. I think it's prevention is key. So when I come home, I always quarantine my clothes. I will take my clothes off outside, as far away from my grow space as I can, and I put those in a bag and I seal that bag up and they stay in that bag until they go to the laundromat. No chances.
It's a smart way to go about it. I'm glad that you haven't had any major pest infestations that you brought from the commercial facility there, that you've only come across fungus gnats and been able to get rid of them pretty easy. That's good to hear. Pests can be a challenge. There are a lot of challenges that can occur, really, not just with pests, but with different parts of growing. Ebb and flow system. Can you talk to us about some of the common issues or challenges that new growers may face when using an ebb and flow system?
Ooh, I think one of the most common issues, because I'm still new to the ebb and flow system, so I think maybe some of these beginner problems I haven't even faced yet. So they're like right around the corner probably for me. Find some new problems I haven't seen. One really common one is it's really easy to forget that right behind you, this reservoir has 30 gallons of water in it, and you forget how the properties of siphoning and gravity work. And if the tip of this hose goes below the surface level of that water, and I turn my back on it for 2 seconds, I might have 20 gallons of water in the floor. Then you have like things like pH drift. And I'm really not, that's one thing I'm looking forward to finding out. What are the common problems? I know some people run into issues with getting their system clogged or dirty, or maybe they're trying to run too many organic nutrients or just stuff that gets gunky in the lines. But I really am not sure what my problems are going to be. So far, in my experience, I found that as long as I keep my EC and my ppm dialed in that reservoir, that's the main thing that I'm worrying about. Really, this flood and drain system has been a dream. It's been so easy for me. And I don't want to curse myself, but it's been very, very hassle-free. I haven't really had much of any problems to speak of. And the plants just grow so fast and they grow so big. They have like such almost constant availability to nutrients.
I'm happy that it's been so easy for you. You're saying those words, and I feel the same way about deep water culture. I grew in soil for 14 years, and I just did my first run. Actually, I've been flowering here in a 2x4, and it's been so easy. Sure, there's a little stumbled at first trying to figure things out. We're getting the pH kind of dialed in. The EC, water temperature, is another thing that I look at. But once you figure those things out,
keep it cool.
It's been so easy for me for most of the grow because of all that.
That's
so
good.
Yeah, I feel the same way about my hydroponic system that you feel about yours.
Are you running any beneficial bacteria in your flood and drain? In your deep water culture?
Nope, just the nutrients in there with an air stone. That's it.
Same here.
Awesome. So as we get towards the end of the episode here, one of the questions I like to ask folks is, can you name off the top 3 strains that you've grown and what you liked about them?
Let me see. I haven't grown too many at home, but let me try to think of some that were at home. One that I really liked was Cushman's from Exotic Genetics. It was really dense, really pretty, really nice, crazy, dark purple hues, flavorful, real nice. It was very photogenic. The Money Ball, which is the one I did in the flood and drain down in the kitchen here, that was from, the first one I said Cushman's was from Exotic. That was actually from Ethos. The Money Ball was Exotic Genetics. That was a Gary Poppins cross, and that one was just super, super frosty. It had some really big nugs that I lost to bud rot, but it was so frosty. And then another one that was amazing was one called Orange Marijuana that we used to grow in this commercial facility I worked in. Probably has to be one of the top 3 craziest smelling terpene profiles I've ever smelled before. It smells like just pure candy. It does not smell like a plant at all. It smells like a sugar purple candy. Very nice though, and huge fat nugs on it.
I'll have to check those out. I haven't grown any of those. And yeah, this is a question that I've just actually started asking about, I don't know, half a dozen episodes or so. And seems like the audience really likes to hear about what their favorite genetics are. And I've had some people in the comments who are like, I just picked some up because I'm so stoked of what I've heard, about it, blah, blah, blah. So thanks for sharing that.
Oh, of course.
So wrapping things up here, can you tell the listeners how they can find you and what you have upcoming in the future?
I got a few different series coming up about growing. We're going to do some more growing tips. I'm going to document some of my hydro experiences coming up very soon. That's what we're starting off 2025 with. And that's all on my YouTube channel, just youtube.com/Strain Show.
There we go. Pretty straightforward. I'll definitely have a link to Matt's channel down in the YouTube description section below. And I also do a pinned comment as well, so you can easily get to his channel and give him a subscription.
Thank you, buddy.
I want to give a big thanks to the folks on Patreon, patreon.com/Mr. Grow It. The folks that are being scrolled on the screen right now are in the producer tier. Special thanks to you. You help keep this podcast going. What questions do you have on the ebb and flow system, and what tips do you have growing hydroponically? Let us know down in the comment section below. I love reading through it because there are really so many different ways to go about it. There's so many different hydro systems, and people tend to do things differently from system to system. So yeah, drop down in the comment section below. Let us know how you do things. Well, Matt, thanks so much for coming on to the podcast, man. Really appreciate it. Good talk.
Thanks for having me on, man. It was an honor to come on the show.
No problem, man. Hope to do it again sometime in the future, and hope to link up again in the future, dude. MJ BizCon was awesome. It was cool to chill and smoke, and yeah, good vibes all around, dude.
For sure. We'll have to link up next time I'm out in Vegas.
Sounds good, man. All right, everybody. Peace out. Catch you in the next episode.